Hello, and welcome back to Storytime Banned Books Read with Me. I'm Kathleen Francis, and it is my pleasure to join you this evening to talk about banned books, banned ideas, and to read together. But first, some news. As reported by Associated Press reporter and journalist Alea Alassar, on Saturday, April 1st, 2023, as distributed by CNN. Judge orders books removed from Texas public libraries due to LGBTQ and racial content must be returned within 24 hours. A federal judge in Texas ruled that at least 12 books removed from public libraries by Llano County officials, many because of their LGBTQ and racial content, must be placed back onto shelves within 24 hours, according to an order filed Thursday, March 30th, 2023. 7 residents sued county officials in April 2022, claiming their First and 14th Amendment rights were violated when books deemed inappropriate by some people in their community and Republican lawmakers were removed from public libraries or access was restricted. The lawsuit, filed in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas in San Antonio, claimed county officials removed books from the shelves of the 3-branch public library system because they disagree with the ideas within them, and terminated access to thousands of digital books because they could not ban 2 specific titles. Books ordered to return to shelves include Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson, They Called Themselves the KKK, The Birth of an American Terrorist Group by Susan Campbell Bartoletti, and Being Jazz, My Life as a Transgender Teen by Jazz Jennings. The library system also is required to reflect these books as available in their catalog, and cannot remove any books for any reason while the case is ongoing, U.S. District Judge Robert Pittman said in his order. Although libraries are afforded great discretion for their selection and acquisition decisions, the First Amendment prohibits the removal of books from libraries based on either viewpoint or content discrimination, Pittman said. The fight to protect access to books comes amid a book banning boom, with an alarming increase in attempts to censor books in K-12 schools, universities, and public libraries. Many of these efforts seek to pull books with LGBTQ characters or themes and are part of a broader conservative-led movement to chisel away at the rights and status of LGBTQ Americans. Many of the book bans have also been aimed at authors of color exploring history, racism, or their own experiences in America. This is a ringing victory for democracy, said Ellen Leonida, an attorney representing the plaintiffs in the Texas case. The government cannot tell citizens what they can or can't read. Our nation was founded on the free exchange of ideas, and banning books you disagree with is a direct attack on our most basic liberties. It wasn't immediately clear whether Llano County officials have complied with the judge's order. Llano County Judge Ron Cunningham, County Commissioners Jerry Don Moss, Peter Jones, Mike Sandoval, and Linda Raschke, Library System Director Amber Millam, and 4 members of the Llano County Library Board, Bonnie Wallace, Rochelle Wells, Rhonda Schneider, and Gay Baskin, are named as co-defendants in the case. They did not respond to requests for comment. The defendants argued the books were removed as part of a regular weeding process following the library's existing policies, but Pittman said there was clear influence from outside sources. Whether or not the books in fact qualified for weeding under the library's existing policies, there is no real question that the targeted review was directly prompted by complaints from patrons and county officials over the contents of these titles, the judge wrote in his order. And, notably, there is no evidence that any of the books were slated to be reviewed for weeding prior to the receipt of these complaints. To the contrary, many other books eligible for weeding based on the same factors appear to have remained on the shelf for many years, he said. Complaints from community groups targeted multiple books they labeled as pornographic filth because they promoted acceptance of LGBTQ views, according to the order. These books were removed from the libraries, according to the order, as well as other books listed as pornographic that were about critical race theory and related racial themes. In one email from community member Bonnie Wallace, who was later elected to the library board, she suggested, quote, all the pastors to get involved in this. Perhaps they can organize a weekly prayer vigil on this specific issue. May God protect our children from this filth. County commissioners also voted to dissolve the library board and replace it with a new library advisory board that appointed multiple Llano County residents, including Wallace, who advocated for the book removals, the order said. The new board required all new books to be presented to and approved by them before purchase, and staff librarians were banned from attending the new board's meetings, according to the order. Book bans aim to suppress the voices of LGBTQ and communities of color. As dozens of books have been pulled from shelves in Texas, new policies expanding oversight of books are being drafted or already passed in multiple states. A Florida school district halted library purchases, and a teacher resigned in Oklahoma over the censorship of books in classroom libraries. In 2022, the number of attempts to censor library books reached an unparalleled record high since the American Library Association, the ALA, began documenting data about book censorship over 20 years ago, ALA said in a March press release. The ALA has cataloged 1,269 attempts in 2022, nearly double the number of challenges in 2021. A book challenge is a demand to remove a book from a library's collection so that no one else can read it, Deborah Caldwell Stone, director of ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom, said in a statement. Quote, their aim is to suppress the voices of those traditionally excluded from our nation's conversations, such as people in the LGBTQIA+ community or people of color. Schools are among those where book bans have been especially targeted. In 2022, Texas led the country with the most book bans. 713, affecting 16 school districts, followed by Pennsylvania and Florida with 456 and 204 bans, respectively, according to an analysis by PEN America, a literary and free expression advocacy organization. Each attempt to ban a book by one of these groups represents a direct attack on every person's constitutionally protected right to freely choose what books to read and what books to explore, Caldwell Stone said. The choice of what to read must be left to the reader or, in the case of children, to parents. That choice does not belong to self-appointed book police. Well, on a more positive note, I have fond memories of my school library. My first school librarian, I remember her name, Ms. Boone, and she ran a tight ship. If you wanted to work in the school library, well, she had to get to know you first, and you had to show up when you promised to. It was a great place to spend time and to learn, and a quiet space to reflect. Now, I remember my first visit to my school library and my first introduction to Ms. Boone, our school librarian, at Livingston School on Delavan Street. And I also remember that our very first visit was as a class, because you better believe that day was a class on how to use and respect the school library. Well, with that, I would like to take some time to point out that it's usually the ideas, not the books, but the ideas in those books that are challenged and often banned. And with that, I'd like to share with you an extraordinary children's book, Seeds of Change, by Jen Cullerton Johnson, illustrated by Sonia, Lynn, Sadler. As a young girl in Kenya, Wangari was taught to respect nature. She grew up loving the land, plants, and animals that surrounded her. From the giant mugumu trees her people, the Kikuyu, revered, to the tiny tadpoles that swam in the river. Although most Kenyan girls were not educated, curious, hard-working Wangari was allowed to go to school. There her mind sprouted like a seed. She excelled at science and went on to study in the United States. After returning home, Wangari blazed a trail across Kenya, using her knowledge and compassion to promote the rights of her countrywomen and to help save the land, one tree at a time. Seeds of Change, Planting a Path to Peace, brings to life the empowering story of Wangari Maathai, the first African woman and environmentalist to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Engaging narrative and vibrant images paint a robust portrait of this inspiring champion of the land and of women's rights. Let's take a moment to learn a little more about the author and the illustrator. Jen Cullerton Johnson is an educator, a writer, and an environmentalist with master's degrees in nonfiction writing and curriculum development. She is taught in countries all over the world and now teaches at an inner-city elementary school in Chicago, where she also conducts writing workshops. Johnson is inspired by Wangari Maathai's dedication to women and the environment. She can be found online at jencullertonjohnson.com. This is her first picture book. Sonia Lynn Sadler is an illustrator and a fine artist. Growing up, she traveled to many countries and lived in 5 different states. Currently splitting her time between Maryland and New Jersey, Sadler focuses her work on the cultures, lives, and stories of people of African descent. Her unique style employs a variety of techniques and mediums, from watercolor to scratchboard, and draws inspiration from quilts. Sadler's website is SoniaLynnSadlerArts.com. And with that, let us begin our read. So it's been a while since we read a children's book together. I'll try and reduce the glare. This book is published by Lee and Low Books of New York. We'll take a moment to look at the beautiful illustrations as best we can right there. Come, Wangari's mother called. She beckoned her young daughter over to a tall tree with a wide, smooth trunk and a crown of green, oval leaves. Feel, her mother whispered. Wangari spread her small hands over the tree's trunk. She smoothed her fingers over the rough bark. This is the mugumo, her mother said. It is home to many. It feeds many too. She snapped off a wild fig from a low branch and gave it to her daughter. Wangari ate the delicious fruit, just as geckos and elephants did. High in the tree, birds chirped in their nests, and branches bounced with jumping monkeys. Our people, the Kikuyu of Kenya, believe that our ancestors rest in the tree's shade, her mother explained. Wangari wrapped her arms around the trunk as if hugging her great-grandmother's spirit. She promised never to cut down the tree. Each year, the mugumu grew, and so did Wangari. As the oldest girl in her family, she had many chores. Every day she fetched water, clear and sweet from the river. In the rainy season, she planted sweet potatoes, millet, and beans. When the sun shone brightly in the dry season, she shooed the chickens into the shade. Sometimes when her brother Nderitu returned from school, he and Wangari played among the arrowroot plants by the stream, where thousands of eggs hatched into tadpoles and tadpoles turned into frogs. During those times, Nderitu told Wangari what he had learned in his classes. Plants give air for people to breathe, he said. 20 divided by 2 is 10. There are 7 great seas to sail. Wangari listened as still as a tree, but her mind swirled with curiosity like the currents in the stream, even though she knew few Kikuyu girls who could read. Wangari dreamed of going to school and learning, just like her brother. I must go to school, she told him. You will, he promised. Beg pardon. Nderitu talked to their parents. Why doesn't Wangari go to school? He asked. Wangari's parents knew she was smart and a hard worker. Although it was unusual for a girl to be educated, they decided to send her to school. They knew she would not disappoint them. After some time to arrange for fees and supplies, Wangari's mother came to her. You are going to school, she told her daughter. Wangari grinned widely and hugged her mother. Thank you, she cried. I will make you proud. Wangari walked the long road to the one-room schoolhouse with walls made of mud, a floor of dirt, and a roof of tin. In time, she learned to copy her letters and trace numbers. Wangari's letters soon made words, and her words made sentences. She learned how numbers could be added and subtracted, multiplied and divided. Animals and plants, she discovered, were like human beings in many ways. They needed air, water, and nourishment too. I'm trying to make this a little bit easier to see. When Wangari finished elementary school, she was 11 years old. Her mind was like a seed rooted in the rich soil, ready to grow. Wangari wanted to continue her education, but to do so, she would have to leave her village and move to the capital city of Nairobi. Wangari had never been farther than her valley's ridge. She was scared. Go, her mother said. She picked up a handful of earth and placed it gently into her daughter's hand. Where you go, we go. Wangari was sad to leave, but she knew that what her mother said was true. Wherever Wangari went, so went her family, her village, and her Kikuyu ways. She kissed her family and said goodbye to the mugumo tree, remembering her promise always to protect it. Wangari's new life in the city amazed her. Skyscrapers towered above her head, not trees. People rushed through the streets like river water over stones. At school, she lived with other girls like her, all trying to weave their village customs with new city ones. At night, when the girls slept, Wangari dreamed of home and the sweet figs of the mugumo tree. Her dreams reminded her to honor her Kikuyu tradition of respecting all living things. Wangari was an excellent student. And science became her favorite subject. She especially loved studying living things. Air, she learned, was made from two molecules of oxygen bonded together. Bodies were made up of cells. Leaves change color because of photosynthesis. As graduation neared, Wangari told her friends she wanted to become a biologist. Not many native women become scientists, they told her. I will, she said. Wangari would have to travel halfway around the world to the United States to study biology. She had never left Kenya and had little money, but with her teacher's help, she won a scholarship to a college in Kansas. America was very different from Kenya. In college, many of Wangari's science professors were women. From then, she learned that a woman could do anything she wanted to, even if it hadn't been done before. While Wangari discovered how molecules move under a microscope lens and how cells divide in petri dishes, she also found her strength as a woman scientist. After she graduated from college, Wangari traveled to Pennsylvania to continue her studies. Letters from home told Wangari about changes in Kenya. The people had elected a Kikuyu president, Jomo Kenyatta. Proud of her country and proud to be Kikuyu, Wangari decided to return home to Kenya to help her people. America had changed Wangari. She had discovered a spirit of possibility and freedom that she wanted to share with Kenyan women. She accepted a teaching job at the University of Nairobi. Not many women were professors then, and even fewer taught science. Wangari led the way for other women and girls. She worked for equal rights so that female scientists would be treated with the same respect as male scientists. Wangari watched sadly as her government sold more and more land to big foreign companies that cut down forests for timber and to clear land for coffee plantations. Native trees such as cedar and acacia were vanished. Without trees, birds had no place to nest. Monkeys lost their swings. Tired mothers walked miles for firewood. When Wangari visited her village, she had visited and saw that the Kikuyu custom of not chopping down the mugumo trees had been lost. No longer held in place by tree roots, the soil streamed into the rivers. The water that had been used to grow maize, bananas, and sweet potatoes turned to mud and dried up. Many families went hungry. Wangari could not bear to think of the land being destroyed. Now married and the mother of 3 children, she worried about what would happen to all the mothers and children who depended on the land. "We must do something," Wangari said. Wangari had an idea as small as a seed, but as tall as a tree that reaches for the sky. "Harabi, let's work together," she said to her countrywomen, mothers like her. Wangari dug deep into the soil, a seedling by her side. "We must plant trees." Many women listened. Many planted seedlings. Some men laughed and sneered. Planting trees was woman's work, they said. Others complained that Wangari was too outspoken, with too many opinions and too much education for a woman. Wangari refused to listen to those who criticized her. Instead, she told them, "Those trees you are cutting down today were not planted by you, but by those who came before. You must plant trees that will benefit the community to come. Like a seedling, with sun, good soil, and abundant rain, the roots of our future will bury themselves in the ground, and a canopy of hope will reach the sky." Wangari traveled to villages, towns, and cities with saplings and seeds, shovels and hoes. At each place she went, women planted rows of trees that looked like green belts across the land. Because of this, they started calling themselves the Green Belt Movement. "We might not change the big world, but we can change the landscape of the forest," she said. That would be Cleo at play. One tree turned to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000,000, all the way up to 30 million planted trees. Kenya grew green again. Birds nested in new trees. Monkeys swung on branches. Rivers filled with clean water. Wild figs grew heavy in mugumo trees and on their branches. Mothers fed their children maize, bananas, and sweet potatoes until they could eat no more. As the green belts moved farther across Kenya, powerful voices rose up against Wangari's movement. Foreign business people, greedy for more land for their coffee plantations and trees for timber, asked, "Who is this woman who can change so many lives with a sapling? Why should we give up our land and profits for trees?" They made a plan to stop Wangari. One day, while she was out planting a tree, some wealthy businessman paid corrupt police officers to arrest Wangari. In her jail cell, Wangari prayed. Like a sturdy tree against a mighty wind, her faith kept her strong. Instead of giving up, she made friends with the other women prisoners. She told them her stories, and they told her their stories. She taught them about her seeds and saplings. Together, they helped one another. Wangari knew many people in Kenya and other countries. They banded together to fight for her release. Before she was freed, Wangari promised to fight for the rights of the other women prisoners too. Wangari realized that the people who had put her in jail didn't like the changes in the land or in the women. The people in charge of big companies wanted to keep the land for themselves, and the government was frightened of too many advances made by women. If she wanted to help save her country and countrywomen, Wangari would have to go out into the world to spread her message. She would have to leave her home once more. Wangari began to travel, telling her story to teachers, presidents, farmers, ambassadors, and school children all over the world. She dug in the dirt, planted seedlings, and spoke about women's rights. With everyone she met, she shared the seeds of change. In time, Kenya changed. More people listened to Wangari's message, calling her the Mama Miti, Mother of Trees. They wanted her to lead them into Kenya's new democracy. Wangari was elected to Kenya's parliament and became Minister of the Environment. Still, she did not stop planting trees. In 2004, Wangari won the most prestigious peace prize in the world, the Nobel Peace Prize. It had never before been awarded to an African woman or an environmentalist. Standing in front of an audience of people from around the world, far from her village, Wangari remembered her girlhood lesson of the Mugumo. She understood that persistence, patience, and commitment to an idea as small as a seed, but as tall as a tree that reaches for the sky, must be planted in every child's heart. Young people, you are our hope and our future, she said. And then, as she had done so many times before, Wangari planted a tree. Wangari Maathai won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004 at the age of 64. Today, she is still active, planting trees and promoting the rights of women and children. She lives in Kenya with memories of her mother's teaching about the Mugumo. The Green Belt movement that Wangari founded in 1977 has spread around the world, teaching people to take care of the environment by planting trees, recycling, and seeking alternative energy sources. Wangari says, "Through the Green Belt movement, we have helped young people get involved in environmental activities. We have tried to instill in them the idea that protecting the environment is not just a pleasure, but also a duty." And with that, we conclude Seeds of Change by Jen Cullerton Johnson. And as always, I thank you for joining me.